Today on the Freakacast news, stay tuned for our Spider-Man review coming soon, and also only 20 days till the Dark Knight rises, and he will rise very soon and very strong. So keep that in mind and stay tuned for the show.
Nickelodeon, Nickelodeon, Nickelodeon.
I'm here with my friends on Nickelodeon. The song never ends on Nickelodeon.
And welcome back to the Freakacast.
The Freakacast! I'm Andrew Felson.
And I'm Matthew Puetz.
And you can find our fabulous show on afelson1.wordpress.com. That's afelson1.wordpress.com.
I disagree. It's not a fabulous show. It's a magnificent show.
Fantabulous. There we go.
Fantastilicious.
Awesome sauce.
Yes.
Anyway, we're also on Stitcher and iTunes. Stitcher is a app for your phone, your device, your tablet, whatever. It's in a podcast app.
Your magic box.
Sure, we'll go with that. And of course, iTunes, you know how to use. You'll probably find us quicker under Andrew's brain. I'll fix it one day. I'll let you know when.
Yeah, hopefully.
But and like I said earlier in other shows, our older shows will be on the WordPress page. Newer shows kind of bump the old ones down. So if you want to hear the older stuff, go to WordPress. You can right-click them and save, or just click on them. You can hear them. Also, we're on YouTube. Our video is up from the songstowearpantsuit.com song that we used for our theme. And we have a video for it on YouTube, the Freakacast theme.
Yep.
We are on Facebook under both the Freakacast and Freakout Entertainment. We're getting right to it.
Songstowearpantsuit.com.
We're trying to get right to it because we have a whole lot of show to get to.
Yes, we do. A wonderful show we do. We had so much fun doing the last show, we just had to continue.
Because really, we weren't done.
Well, yeah, of course not. But, I mean, it was so much fun that we kept going. So, here we are.
Here we are.
And now, that's actually rather interesting, the title of the show we're going to start with, because, well, we started off with the origin. We had the 3 shows that got started off. Well, things kind of get a little, I don't know, modern as time goes on.
Yeah. Rocko's Modern Life.
Yep.
This is by far one of my favorites.
And a show I have seen, I don't want to say the least amount, but show I didn't see as much.
I really love this show. For a lot of reasons. Just because it's kind of, brilliantly written in terms of, it's the basic premise of the show is it's following a character who is basically not too long out of school and entering the real world for the first time. And not only that, but he's also in a new setting because he's originally from Australia.
Right.
And he's trying to adapt to American life and also adult life.
And you touched on the exact reason why I didn't like the show as much. I'm not going to say I didn't like the show, but why I couldn't get into it. I couldn't relate to it at all.
Well, I would say, I'll probably say it again, but I would say give this show another chance.
Well, I did actually. I've seen an episode I saw, because I think you showed me an episode recently, or I saw it on YouTube, one of the two. And I will agree, the writing in the show is good. It's just at the time the show came out, which was...
It ran from 93, so a couple years after their big initial startup for their first 3 big shows, and it ran till about 96.
Right. And, not to say that it was all Batman's fault, but certainly at the time, I was more interested in Batman and the Warner Brothers shows than anything else. And I really didn't pay that much attention to any other company, whether it was Disney or Nickelodeon for that matter.
Yeah, Matt, you should know by now. It's never the Batman's fault. He is the solution, not the problem.
You finally understand.
I've known. I've just been mocking you this whole time.
I know.
Because it's more fun. Speaking of fun, this show is created by Joe Murray, and he initially didn't think Nickelodeon would buy it.
Now, here's the interesting thing. His name seems awfully familiar.
We'll get to that.
Okay.
I mean, he's basically a fairly well-known animator and story writer, and responsible for quite a bit of stuff that we're...
It's not Bill Murray's brother or something, is it?
No.
Okay.
He's just really good at his job.
Okay.
I mean, I'm kind of skipping ahead, but he and his staff would go on to make a lot of other shows that you would know, most notably SpongeBob.
Oh, okay.
But he's also been involved in a lot of other cartoons. Can't name any off the top of my head, but he and his crew have been involved in a lot of stuff that has been popular in both Nickelodeon, Cartoon Network, Disney. They've gone back and forth with all the animation studios and made really good stuff. So he's along with some of the elite that's been really putting on good quality work.
Yeah. So he's kind of like in that same group of like Paul Dini and those guys.
Joe initially didn't think Nickelodeon would take this because he's like, because he initially got the inspiration from going to a zoo, seeing a wallaby.
Right.
And he thought was funny was the wallaby just kind of was oblivious to what was going on around him.
Yeah.
And he's like, that would be a funny character where it kind of is in this area and it's oblivious to what's going on.
Right.
And he has to interact with it somehow eventually.
Right.
Let me pitch this as a show and make a show. And then he submitted it and then kind of forgot about it. And then he was surprised when Nickelodeon was like, yeah, we like this. Let's bring it on. And he's like, all right.
Well, what was it that they liked? What do you think what it was that they liked about it? Was it the writing? Was it the concept?
Kind of all the above, where they liked the writing idea because he was obviously talented.
Okay.
But they also liked the fact that it's got a more subtle, like, comparative to Ren and Stimpy.
Yeah.
It had a more subtle sense of humor to it.
Yeah.
It was still out there.
Right.
And it still had some of the stuff that made Ren and Stimpy great, but it was not as blatant.
Right.
And it really had a good tone to it, had a good feel to it.
So
the animation was nice.
So it had a good balance.
It did. And they were like, let's make more. And he's like, okay, and it ended up being really popular. It was obviously not near as popular as some of the other ones. It would never reach that height, but it was certainly, it hung in there quite a bit.
Yeah.
It was definitely among their top rated. And what I really loved about the show, like I kind of touched on, is the fact that this is a show, like a lot of good shows, that has aged considerably well.
That makes a big difference.
Where they had jokes that we didn't get as kids.
Actually, that kind of touches up on the one episode I did see recently. Obviously, I don't remember any episodes from when I saw then. But from the episode I did see recently, it was one where Rocco goes to a theme park. And it's as the episode's going along, like he goes to one ride and he has to pay the money and that sort of thing. It's like, they're making a comment on how, paying up the nose to the man and you just drained you and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So it's like, okay, I get this as an adult. Yeah, I wouldn't have gotten this as a kid. And I think for me it was, I don't know, it was a combination. It's just a number of things as to why I didn't get into that show. I can't really pinpoint it. I think it was a combination of like the tone itself was maybe a little more than what I was expecting. I think the art style, too. It's not that it was bad art or anything. It was just just seemed like a neutral color palette at the time. Then again, I was a lot younger. I really don't remember, so
well,
who knows?
The artwork kind of plays into the fact that it based a lot of it on its surrealist humor.
Right.
Which you've said before you don't always get.
Yeah.
But which is fine, because the thing is, it was a very grounded surrealist. Like, it had definitely a lot of elements to it. Like, the sense of humor was offbeat, but it was consistent.
Right.
There was a consistent setting, consistent tone, and even at its craziest, it was still kind of brought it back to it where it needed to be. And there was just running gags all throughout, like everything. Like a lot of the names had the word O in it, like it was O-Town.
Okay.
Conglommo owned everything, which was their thing of like big business controls this. So O-Town is run by Conglommo, and in O-Town there is kind of a lot of comics. there's Chunky Chicken is the big restaurant they like to go to. There's, there's just a lot of funny things like that, and there's the vacuum, like for their pilot episode, or one of their pilot episodes, like their second pilot episode was the Suck-O-Matic.
That would be right there a reason why my mom would not like the show.
But it was a vacuum.
She would have not... I do also recall, now that I think about it, my mom did not like the fact that his friend's name was Heifer.
But he was a steer.
It doesn't matter. At least it didn't matter to my mom. She's like, I don't want you watching that show. I don't like the fact they're using that name.
But it's another word for cow.
Doesn't matter.
Whatever.
My mom took that as...
An insult?
An insult.
Well, he was big.
So she didn't like the name, and this is also the time period where my mom had more influence on what I watched than I would have cared to.
Gotcha.
Obviously if she's not letting me watch Ren and Stimpy, and she's like, oh, I don't like that. I don't like that. I don't want you watching that.
Yeah, my mom never had a problem with Rocco's Modern Life.
Then again, as we've discovered...
Our parents are very different.
Yes, and your mom tolerates more things than my mom. Your mom also understands more things than my mom does.
But she didn't let me watch Jim Carrey. So.
Yeah, go figure on that one.
Or The Simpsons.
My mom wasn't... I never got into The Simpsons much.
Well, now thanks to her, I never did either. Because by the time I was old enough to watch it, I just never got interest.
Yeah. I remember the Halloween episode. As far as shows, this is... I do remember bits and pieces. Like, I remember, he had the Australian accent. I remember, I don't know.
Well, let's kind of go back to the fact that this is a show about Rocco and his living in O-Town and his friends.
Right.
Heifer.
Okay, so he's got his friend
steer,
Heifer.
and Filbert the turtle.
Filbert the turtle. I don't remember that one.
He's kind of the more nerdish of the bunch.
Okay.
He had a soft-spoken voice. He had glasses. Sometimes he was picked on by other people, but overall he kind of started off as a side character, but then he kind of grew into a more notable character in the show. So he just kind of grew to be Rocco's friend.
So what was the base, like, what are some of the episodes you recall the most?
The nice thing about it is it's kind of had the same sense of, in Doug's kind of going for it, where it would just kind of pick apart some of Rocco's days, and some of his problems, like one episode it was like, it's hot outside, let's go to the beach. And all his misadventures and troubles of trying to go to the beach, going to every single parking lot, they're all full. He's like, oh, this lot's full. Wait, this lot's full. Well, this one's empty. This looks familiar. Ends up being his house. So he parks at his house, has to walk to the beach.
This one actually sounds vaguely familiar. Was this tacked onto the same episode that I described?
Maybe.
Because I feel like
some of them were full length, some of them were like kind of half episodes.
Okay. Because that sounds vaguely familiar.
Like another episode was he loses his job at one comic book store. He goes to Conglommo where his neighbor, Mr. Bighead,
that's an original name.
Yeah, Ed Bighead is his name. He's a toad. He does not like Rocco for whatever reason. So he's like, okay, I'm going to make sure he's not get the job. Two, I'm going to make sure it's hard for him. Yeah. But it goes bad for Mr. Bighead.
Because Rocco's really good at the job, or?
No, it's just all the things he was hoping to inflict on Rocco backfired on him.
So it's like Wile E. Coyote.
Kinda.
Nice. Like
at one point, they're like in a testing lab.
Uh-huh.
And he's like, here, try this gum. And Rocco, chews it, and a tree goes out of his head. And at first, it's like, haha, since he's going to hate it. And Rocco's like, this is great. It makes oxygen, gives me shade. Sometimes birds will sit in it. This is nice. And it's like, give me that. And he puts all the gum in his mouth. And then a beehive sprouts on his head and he gets chased by bees. And then in another part of that, they're testing out angry giraffe stampede spray, anti-giraffe stampede spray. So he sprays Rocco with it, thinking it's not going to work. Right. And he lets loose the stampede. They go around Rocco and stampede all over Ed. And Rocco's like, it worked, right? Are you okay? He's like, you're fired!
That's pretty funny.
Yeah, and Rocco had a little dog, Spunky.
Okay.
Who lived up to his name, but he was also not very intelligent. So he would just get into a lot of trouble. So sometimes episodes revolved around Rocco trying to save his dog, get him out of trouble.
This sounds like a show that I would appreciate now.
It is, and those are the ones that feature kind of like Rocco by himself. Then you have episodes that feature Rocco and his friends, so he has his interaction there. When all the antics they get up to, like Heifer loves to eat and he likes to get into mischief. Filbert is a bit more of the neurotic part, where he's not as willing to get into the mischief, but sometimes he'll tag along and gets into it as well.
Right.
When Filbert was first seen, one of his key things, like in the comic book store, was he was like, I love comic books, but the ink, it gets on your hands. So for me, I have to turn the page, wash your hands. Turn the page, wash your hands. Turn the page, and then you wash your hands. And the whole time Rocco's ignoring him because he's reading a comic book. But no, ignoring in a good way. He's like, yeah, you're here. You're here. If you say something other than turn the page and wash your hands, I'll respond.
It's interesting that they introduced a neurotic character like that too.
But they kind of through its run, they had a lot of cool characters they introduced. Some just cameos. One of my favorite things from that show, among them, was my friend, whom I'll refer to as Durf. He and I, for whatever reason, had this big connection for this one part of this episode. It was during the part where Rocco had lost his job, and he was job hunting. He was going from job to job. And here's kind of a way they had a very subtle way of working in adult things. Okay. Or as a kid, you don't know what's going on here. Right. It's Rocco, and he goes, and he's looking at a newspaper and said, something to do with a phone, like a phone answering service. I can do that, right? Right. And so he's on the phone, and he goes, "Oh baby, oh baby, oh baby." And here's the kicker.
That is sneaky.
And here's the kicker. The part that made it great. Ed's wife picks up the phone and she goes, "Rocco?" And Rocco goes, "Mrs. Bighead?" And they both slam the phone at the same time. So Durf and I would start off, he and I, one of the two would go, "Oh baby, oh baby, oh baby," and the other would answer, "Rocco?" And then back and forth, "Mrs. Bighead?" Bam! So, I mean, that's among the reasons why I always loved that show, just for the fact that, you know, a friend of mine and I had that one bit down to a T. And so, and even today, if one of us starts it, we'll finish that bit.
I have to find this. I have to find a way to use this in my system.
I mean, I even sent it to him on Facebook, and he'll respond.
Oh yeah.
So it's just kind of a not so much inside joke because we've done it in front of people.
Yeah.
But it's really fun to me. It's very fun to me, and the thing is, like, that kind of subtlety that kind of went beyond, like, every now and then even the kids can spot it, but it was there to the point where adults, would be like, ha,
yeah,
they snuck that in there good, and I like it.
Yeah.
So it holds up.
But
It's
did
a
it
really
in a
fun
way
show.
that it doesn't. The kids don't need to know what's going on.
Right, and the thing is, it adds to the show. It does not hinder the show.
Yeah.
Like, I would say, going out on a limb, I love Ren and Stimpy, but sometimes it kind of goes overboard, and it kind of hinders it.
Right.
Where it's sort of like kind of being blatant and out there and crude just to do it.
Well, and the other thing too is, especially with comedy, sometimes dancing around what you're saying, like sometimes I think it's funnier instead of using a cuss word to use like every other word you can but that one.
Sort of like it's what you don't say what makes it funny.
Exactly. And then you have to come up with creative words to use and create. It forces you to be more creative, and I think that's something that people tend to. It's underrated, I think. People think they have to go all out and everything. It's like, no, sometimes if you hold back and you actually force yourself to be creative with how you can not do something, you end up with something even better.
Right, and because of that, there are a couple things that had to be censored.
Right.
Like, or just plain cut. But most of it has been put back in for, like, the DVDs and so the iTunes release, because you can buy episodes on iTunes.
Oh, nice.
So most of that have either been put back in or just released separately.
Right.
And this is another show that, like, some of these shows end up getting the status of a cult hit where it just has a very devoted fan following.
Oh, nice.
Where people just really like it. And, will go out of their way to buy episodes, say, hey, we like this show.
Yeah. Like,
bring it back if you can, kind of thing. So, overall, it's among my favorites of the Nick Toons.
Nice.
I mean, you haven't watched it much, so I really can't say. Matt, you have anything to add? Other than Mom wouldn't let you watch it?
Other than the fact that I think I'm going to have to check out some more episodes.
They are good. I mean, some are going to be definitely better than others, but I can recommend you some.
Okay. Well, I'll have to do that. And also, we'll probably, should recommend some for our listeners.
Just check us out on Facebook. We'll put some episode titles that you can either look up on YouTube or buy yourself, because, hey, the more people buy stuff that have linked back to people who will produce it, the better. Because, like, if it shows...
then they have a better shot of remaking it.
Remaking it, or just the fact that making it more readily available. Right. Like, because some things aren't as so much. Like this next one. I didn't even know had a DVD release. It did, but not really out there as much. And I think only one season is out. Okay. Which is our next topic. Real Monsters. A very different show. Yeah. I do at least remember seeing, like, the previews. I may have seen an episode. I remember... And this is going pretty far back, and having to remember, because at this time I was getting out of the Nick Toons. I think for me, like, once I got kind of done with, once Doug, I think that's what it was, is once Doug kind of ran its course the first go around, I wasn't as interested in the other Nick Toons that were being there, so it was harder for me to get into those. And this was definitely one of those shows where, okay, I'm kind of curious, but I'm not sure. So I'm kind of in the same boat in a way where I would say after Rocco, I started losing interest too. Right. I do definitely remember watching at least the first season or part of the first season of Real Monsters. Right. But beyond this, not so much. Okay. Most, like, from here on out, folks, the Nicktoons we'll be talking about are not going to have quite as much of for us, a level of
Nostalgia.
Nostalgia, because we didn't really watch them.
Yeah.
I was definitely aware of some, and maybe have seen episodes of, but for the most part, Our Real Monsters to me is kind of the last hurrah for Nick Toons until a later one, which we'll get to.
Right.
Which I didn't even see in its prime run. But for Our Real Monsters, it was created by, I may need help for, is this someone we've mentioned before?
Gabor?
Yeah.
Yeah. Gabor Supo.
So the person who created Rugrats, and also Peter Gaffney. Did we mention him before? I don't think so.
Sounds familiar, but it's hard to tell.
So those two people created this, and it ran from 94, so a year after Rocco debuted,
right,
and ran till 97. So
That's
lasted
a good 3-year run.
So lasted one more year than Rocco. Oh, and about the same, actually, since Rocco was first.
Yeah.
The basic premise is actually one that has been reused.
Okay.
Where it's the idea of monsters living, away in the sense basically in this case under the sewers of New York,
right,
or under the dump in the sewers of New York,
right,
and they're going to school, and they're learning how to be better monsters, but their primary job is to scare people, because if they don't scare people, they do not exist.
This sounds oddly familiar.
Yeah.
Where have we seen this before? Monsters Inc.
Monsters Inc.
Which probably did it better. I mean, it's hard to tell because we haven't really...
Well, I mean, they are different enough in the sense of, obviously the premise I just said is very different from Monsters Inc., but the idea of of their society basing itself on human emotion, specifically being scared, is a big topic for both.
Oh, yeah.
And it follows around 3 main monsters, Ickis, Oblina, and Crumb.
Okay. For some reason, I thought you were going to say Ickis, Bickus, and Boo.
No, that would have probably not would have gone as well.
I don't know. I like the sound. Ickis, Bickus, and Boo.
Ickis is a little red monster with big ears. He kind of looks like a rabbit and sometimes gets confused for one, which is kind of his hindrance. Oblina looks like a black and white upside-down candy cane with big lips.
Okay.
And Crumb... how do you describe Crumb? Crumb kind of looks like a meatball.
Tasty.
No, I mean, let me take that back. I don't know what you to describe Crumb, because he's basically a body, but not a human body.
Okay.
And his eyes aren't attached to his head, so he has to hold them up like this. And he has and his big main way of scaring people is he smells bad, so he has really big armpit hairs.
Okay.
And Ickis' main tactic of scaring people is he's able to grow really big and be like, ah!
Okay.
And Oblina can shapeshift.
All right. So the 3 different distinct characters.
Mm-hmm.
That's always a good thing.
And they go to their school. It's run by the Grumble, who is their very harsh headmaster.
Grumble, grumble, grumble.
Kinda. And he's an odd-looking fellow.
Well, they are monsters after all, so this makes sense.
And what was kind of nice about this is I will say this for the artwork. I personally don't care for the artwork as much as some of the other ones, because it is supposed to be monsters, so it's not as bright. It's a lot more dark.
Right.
Like it has more of I'll say the word drab.
Right.
Kind of tone and look to it. But the actual designs of all the characters and all the monsters was very creative. Because they were every single one was very different looking.
Right.
And very distinct. So there was no kind of like a pattern in terms of they must look like this. Like it's got to be like a wolf man or a this or a that. It's just kind of all shapes and sizes of all different.
Well, plus that way when you look at Ickis, you know it's Ickis. When you look at Oblina, you know it's Oblina, and then Crumb, you know it's Crumb.
Right.
Which I think is important.
Mm-hmm. But even like all their classmates are very different looking. Like they all have different, let's say, themes going for them.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, their main purpose is trying to interact in the human world and scare them.
Okay.
But they don't want to interact in terms of, that's where they are. They have to kind of hide from them. They have to hide their existence. Their idea is, we don't exist until we have to scare them. And then we do, but the moment we do, we have to beat it.
Right.
So some of the episodes involved trying to hide. Like, oh, no, we've been photographed. We've got to go and take all the newspapers back because we can't let our photograph being seen.
Right.
And like the main 3 monsters each have their own very distinct personality. Like Ickis is very nervous about it. He sometimes doubts himself, so he's like, I'm not a good monster. I can't scare people. So they'd have to try to keep motivating Ickis.
Yeah.
Oblina, she's far more confident. She's like kind of the stability of things.
Okay.
And Crumb's kind of the more easygoing, like, whatever. I'm doing it because it's fun.
This sounds a little bit like Harry, Ron, and Hermione.
A little bit.
Just in terms of like the characterization. Obviously, it's a little bit different, but they're very distinct, and you
Plus,
get
they're
that,
going to a specific school.
Yeah.
Run by a harsh headmaster.
Yeah. Except Harry, Ron, and Hermione don't have to scare people.
No.
That would be funny, though.
It would be. I mean, in that one movie where she drank the cat, like the what was it, polyjuice potion, and had the cat hairs mixed in, that was kind of scary in a different way.
Yeah. That's always interesting.
But from what I remember, it was a pretty decent show.
Okay.
One of our favorite people was in it. Tim Curry. He had a voice.
Oh. He'll come back later.
Yes, he will, I'm sure.
Because, you know, for some reason, having Tim Curry in your show just makes it that much better. Which, well, I say which, but and we did talk about how the fact that Tim Curry was apparently too much for Batman.
Yeah, we talked about that.
But still, at least the fact that, you know, even with a show like that, he was still being noted for. So.
And the thing is, I know the character who he portrayed, but from memory, and also probably if I looked it up, I never would have guessed. Because it does not have that deep, like, Tim Curry voice.
It doesn't have the typical Tim Curry voice.
No, not at all. So
that's a good thing, actually.
Had I not looked it up, I would not have known.
That's a good thing, because that means that he can do more voices than his own. And like I said, it's his testament to it as an actor, voice actor.
Because not only was it a different pitch and tone altogether, he kind of had like a bit of an accent.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, then.
So really, like, that's when I say, knowing who the character is, and remembering the voice in my head, I would never in a million years would have said, that was Tim Curry.
That's good. Go Tim. Good for him.
But really, honestly, because I don't watch it as much, I don't have enough memories to really go on anymore on it.
Yeah, no, well, I'm in the same boat with you there.
Other than the fact that I do remember it being fairly creative.
Yeah.
You know, they had, like, there were some episode plots here and there I kind of remember.
Yeah.
Like, I do remember, like, they were in a mall. It was after hours, so they're kind of stuck in the mall.
Right.
And they were about to leave, and they're like, we can get out of here. Here's the way out. But they get attracted by something. And then they make it their goal. We have to get this one item, no matter the cost. But there's dogs around. There's a guard. Who cares? We have to find a way to get this one thing because it so fascinates us. You know what that one thing was?
What?
A lava lamp.
Now I don't understand why you have a lava lamp.
Well, I have a lava lamp for different reasons. I had one long before the show.
Still, that makes it even cooler, though. I'm not going to be able to look at it the same way twice again.
What's kind of funny is Belina kind of has a kind of off-British accent.
Okay.
So some of the words she says, they're like, what? So they refer to it as the lamp.
Right.
But the way she kind of says it sounds like the lump.
Right.
The lump. And they're like, the lump? It's like, no, the lamp. Oh, the lamp. And for them, like, the human world kind of fascinated them, but they also knew it was kind of, dangerous. And also, from what I remember of the show, they had to eat like garbage and junk and trash.
Right.
If they ate human food, they would get sick.
Oh, okay.
So anything clean was bad. So soap, water, no good. That'd be filth and grime.
Yeah. Oh.
But certain things fascinating. Like, I remember also another episode that TV fascinated them too.
Well, still, that fascinates me too sometimes.
Oh yeah.
So you'd be sitting there watching the monsters watch TV.
Not so much that. It was more of the monsters like trying to figure out how do we get TV? How do we make it work? How can we somehow get the stuff that was on the picture tube here? So they had a very rudimentary understanding of the world.
So I think that's actually makes it more interesting.
Because it wasn't like they had okay, here's this. It was like they knew that a camera took pictures, but they didn't know it was called a camera. It was like the flashy paper thing.
Yeah.
Because they knew it made a flash and you wound up on paper.
Makes sense. I like that, the flashy paper thing. Obviously, they're most likely a Polaroid camera.
Some of them.
Definitely a show worth checking out. I think, again, just because it sounds like a good premise.
The thing is, I haven't seen it in so long. There may be stuff that I missed as a kid.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Plus, like I said, I mean, I like the premise already, so just that alone, it's like, we should check this out. But going along with the Tim Curry theme, and I'll touch upon that in just a second, we have, after / in the same vein of Real Monsters, we have the Wild Thornberrys.
Smashing! The only thing I remember from that show.
Yes. Well, he was voiced by Tim Curry.
Yeah. Now that I remember his voice, yeah, that was Tim Curry.
Yeah. But the one thing I liked about it was he wasn't a villain.
No.
In fact, he was a very klutzy kind of, almost like a Dudley Do-Right kind of guy. Like, he was very positive and, like, so not the Tim Curry we're expecting.
Right.
Which made it interesting. But anyway, to kind of segue here, that character that Tim Curry played was called Nigel. He was Nigel Thornberry. He was I guess he was kind of like just a safari hunter guy. Like, he just would go on these...
I don't think they were hunting.
Hunting's the wrong word. But
let's say explorer.
There you go. He was an explorer, and, it was him and his family, and it is... his daughter, Eliza, was the main character, and we saw the adventures of the Thornberrys through her eyes. And the interesting thing about her was that she could actually talk to animals. This was a power bestowed upon her from an African shaman. And so we saw her adventures, her family's adventures through her eyes. And a couple things the show did a little bit differently. One, they had kind of like a voiceover monologue from Eliza. Kind of gets you the premise of the episode, what she's been doing, what she's going to be doing.
I do remember that, where she's like basically saying, "Hi, I'm Eliza. I'm traveling with my family. He's my dad, my mom, my sister."
Right.
And like, here's, what's his name? The monkey.
Darwin.
Here's Darwin. He found us, and here's this wild child kid, and we found him.
Yeah, I do remember it, and that was one of those shows where...
And I can talk to animals. And
it was one of those things where this was a show I actually saw later, oddly enough, than its original run, which I could not find. Well, I just say mid to late 90s. That sounds pretty good. Actually, I ended up watching the show in college. For some reason, I found it like almost 10 years too late, but you know what? It was a good show. It's not as... catchy, I think, as some of the other ones, but it's got a good solid premise, and you are engaged just because they're in kind of like that jungle, safari atmosphere. So you're intrigued because it's okay. It's not the world I'm used to. It's something a little bit more removed. So that gives you that kind of escapism, but it's dealing with real people.
Right. So I could probably point out just from, even though I really didn't watch the show much, I can kind of just from observation kind of point this out with the fact that. We had the last couple that I mentioned, Ren and Stimpy, Rocco, Odd Real Monsters. Those kind of had a far more, let's say, Saturday morning cartoony feel where... Well,
not only that, but they were animals.
They were animals, and they had a lot of weird stuff going on for it. The Wild Thornberrys kind of goes back to a Rugrats Doug kind of thing. And not only that, but I believe this may be the first Nick Toon that has a female as the main protagonist.
Oh, I wouldn't doubt it. For at least from the shows that we've described, yes, certainly. Which... Probably, I don't know if it was groundbreaking necessarily at the time, just because I'm not sure.
Maybe not groundbreaking. I mean,
what other shows had, but certainly was something that was worth.
But for their Nicktoons, I would say, it's certainly something of note.
But also, it was the first Nicktoon to use the 22-minute story format. I mean, as you previously mentioned with Rocko's Modern Life, they would have half episodes. And obviously with Ren and Stimpy, they were all over the place, so who knows. But I remember even with Rugrats and Doug, it was kind of segmented into their smaller bits where, you'd watch part of an episode, go to commercial, and come back, and it's a whole new section. So this was the first one. They literally said, laid it out. Okay, it's going to be 22 minutes. It's one long, continuous storyline. And I definitely feel, like I said, I watched the show later than when its initial run. Mm-hmm. But what I liked about the show was the fact that it felt a little bit more grounded than some of the other shows. And I think it kind of goes back to the fact that you're using human characters as opposed to animals that talk. And so I think that kind of helps ground it. Not so much in reality, but at least to a relatability factor.
But the nice thing is, because she can talk to animals, you can still have that.
Yeah. And that works in a way that you're not expecting. For instance, a Darwin, their pet chimpanzee, she talks to him and they have adventures.
I kind of think they refer to him as part of the family more than a pet.
Well, yeah. That's as most people do with their pets. The interesting thing, because you've mentioned, we mentioned that her dad, Nigel, was voiced by Tim Curry. Mm-hmm. But other awesome people did voices for this show. Darwin was voiced by none other than the master himself, Tom Kane. I say he's the master because he's now taken on the role of Yoda. And once you do that, come on, you're the master. But also the younger brother, Donnie, the wild child. Guess who voiced him? Don't look at the notes.
Who? I have no idea.
Okay.
I mean, can you really call it a voice? Because I don't think he really spoke much.
He
He made a lot of noises.
made a lot of noises. There was a voice to it at some
Yeah, I mean,
extent.
obviously someone had to make all the blah, blah, blah stuff
Yeah.
he did.
But it was actually this guy Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Nice.
Totally not a voice actor.
Who knew?
But the fact is, I mean, I don't know a lot of people, but I know who the Red Hot Chili Peppers are, and I'm like, holy crap! Somebody from a well-known band gets a voiceover role.
And considering the fact that they needed someone who's supposed to be like a crazy wild child,
Yeah.
you need someone with a lot of vocal range because that's someone who's going to be going all over the place with their vocals.
Yeah.
It makes sense to get a singer.
It does. It really does. But as far I can't sit here and say that there's necessarily any specific notable episodes, but they did actually have the Wild Thornberrys movie in 2002. And oddly enough, this made a fair amount of money. It made $60 million, which, we look at 200 million in Avengers opening weekend and they're like, 60 million is nothing. It's like, well,
But for a Nick Toons
for an animated movie, and
not
people
bad.
who actually go out to the theater, that's actually pretty good. And most likely they made a profit because those things are fairly lower cost compared to a lot of other movies to make. But also earned an Academy Award nomination. I'm not sure what that award nomination was for, but the fact that it got an award nomination is of note. And that's something we should, say, well, all right, good job. You made it that far. And a lot of movies don't make it that far, even bigger budget movies. So...
Well, I mean, for a lot of this part, this kind of speaks for a lot of these Nick Toons, is they really put a lot of quality and effort into them.
yeah.
Like, some of these were definitely not rushed out. Some of them,
yeah.
I would say some maybe, that maybe you and I didn't quite care for as much, but
Right.
for the most part, they pretty well put a lot of quality and effort into these cartoons.
Right. And that's one of the things about these cartoons that helped separate them from the other stuff is, of course, they haven't been doing quite as well lately, but...
Well, that's kind of across the board at the moment.
Well, the thing
It's starting to
is...
turn around, I feel, but...
Yeah, especially with, oddly enough, My Little Pony. But I think, oddly enough, what it is we're at a day and age now where material is so much more readily available and in so many different formats that to compare today with yesteryear, if we're, for a lack of a better word, I feel old now. The 90s were a time where, you didn't have Cartoon Network. At least not till the late 90s, and then you had to buy cable, and that was expensive because it's like, oh, yeah, we can, at least I don't know how your parents were, but my parents were like, we don't really want to buy cable because we can get TV for free right now. So, the cartoons that we grew up with, that we literally grew up with, in the late 80s, early 90s, well, those were on local channels.
Mm-hmm.
We could easily see, but we had to wait till Saturday morning to see them, or the afternoon when we got home from school. Now you can watch a cartoon when you want. Either go on YouTube, or you can go download, it from iTunes, or you can watch it on Cartoon Network, or you can still watch it on Nickelodeon.
Or these days, all these cartoons or shows just have their own website dedicated to it. It's like, hey, here's some episodes.
Yeah, for instance, StarWars.com. After an episode of Clone Wars is aired on TV, you can watch it online the next day. It's just it's hard for us to really compare this because it is apples and oranges.
Sounds kind of it's kind of makes you appreciate the stuff that you had to wait for.
It does,
and you had it kind of lessens it now when it's just like in an instant you have it.
Well, and it's one of those things where things are generally appreciated better and appreciated more when you have to wait for it. It's completely unrelated, but honestly, I think I'm going to appreciate The Dark Knight Rises more because I've had to wait for it for the last 4 years. Because there is that buildup of anticipation. Same with Saturday morning cartoons. You had that. You had to wait all week to see the next episode of Darkwing Duck. You don't want to know what happens, or you want to see how the episode is going to play out, and so you build up this anticipation in your head, and then when you see oh my god, that was amazing. It's not till after the fact you've seen it a couple of times, and you get older, and you're like, oh, well, probably wasn't exactly as good as I remember, but at the time you had such a high level of anticipation. Finally getting to see it was the biggest payoff.
Right.
And I think that's what these shows had going for it. And I think that's one of the things I miss, quite honestly. mostly because I have to work on Saturday mornings, but certainly it would be nice to be, it's actually one of the few things I have with Clone Wars now is I look forward to, the next episode. And that anticipation, makes it that much better of an experience.
Mm-hmm.
But that's my soapbox and rant for the day, so.
It's all right.
So after the Wild Thornberries, that was successful. And, by the way, as I was ranting, I had a chance to check it out. The show actually did run from 1998 to 2004, so apparently I was probably about the time the show was running that I was watching it, later in its term, because, about mid-college that I started watching it. But they said, you know what, the Wild Thornberries is successful, human character shows are doing well, let's try a new one. So they came out with Rocket Power.
I've never seen a single episode of this.
Okay, this, good. I'll give you a chance to talk while you listen. Not that I'm hinting at anything. This was actually a show I've seen. This is kind of weird. Like, I've seen a number of episodes. I've probably seen a full season just over the course of the seasons, but I can't remember any specific episode. Because, like I said, when it comes to watching TV, unless I see an episode multiple times, I don't remember the episode. I'll remember the main idea of the show. Like, for instance, a good example, Clone Wars. I've seen all the episodes. Can I tell you what happens in one? Probably not, unless I've watched it multiple times. And that's a recent show. So
Yeah.
But Rocket Power, oddly enough, it didn't have to do with rockets. Rocket was actually the last name of one of the characters. You have the main character, what's his name? Otto. Otto Rocket and his dad. And his dad was an owner of like a little food bar stand sort of thing. It took place in this fake town called Ocean Shores, California. This was a skater show.
Gotcha.
It had to do with skateboarding and rollerblading and that sort of stuff. And they're in
surfboarding, I imagine. They're in California.
To an extent, but honestly, it was more about the skateboarding and rollerblading. Okay. It actually they touched on surfing a little bit, but not much. Just because this is the X Games and the Extreme generation, that sort of thing. So it's playing to a different audience than what we were when we grew up. But,
it ran from 99 to 2004, so the old extreme attitude.
Yeah.
We're done with the 90s, on to the new millennia, that kind of attitude.
Yeah.
It's got to be extreme.
Yeah.
Spelled with an X.
Yeah. Even though that, it's unnecessary. But
I just remember, looking at ads for the show thinking, oh, it's the sports one.
Yeah.
Because that's like all they did.
But the thing is, it wasn't actually, while they had sports elements to it, that's not what the show was. Actually, one of the things I remember about the show was that it really touched on the relationship between Otto and his father. And the fact that his father was, I don't remember if he was divorced, but he was a single dad. And the show, while it was a tune, it actually had a lot of, I don't want to say sitcom attitude towards it, but it had an attitude of saying, yeah, it's a cartoon, but we're not going to treat it as a cartoon. It was definitely not a cartoon like Rocko's Modern Life or anything like that. Or even like Wild Thornberries. It took itself, for the most part, seriously, as far as it's about these 4 kids growing up in this town, and one of them, his dad runs this kind of, this food bar stand sort of thing. And there's the relationship between those 2 characters and the relationships with the other people they come in contact with. And oddly enough, I ended up liking this show just because of that. It had especially since I had gotten, at that point, because it's, when did this thing start? 99. At that point, I was, much more into, well, not that Batman Beyond is reality, but it took itself more seriously than other shows that I had previously watched. Certainly much more than DuckTales.
Yeah.
Woo! So, I figured I'd throw you that one. But and even more so than like the other Warner Brothers cartoons, like Freakazoid and that sort of stuff. Plus, that wasn't on anymore, so I couldn't watch it.
Yeah.
And I was sad. But the fact that the show actually took itself seriously, you had Otto's friends, Reggie, Twister, and Squid, and they had to go to school, but they were also on this rollerblading skating team and that sort of stuff. So they had their school life and then the after school life and that sort of thing, and this was a show that I was surprised that I liked. I caught, I remember flipping through the channels like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what this rocket power thing is. I think what caught me on, what trapped me in the first time was I saw rocket power. I'm like, ooh, it's going to have rockets. No, it doesn't, but actually it's kind of good and entertaining. So I recommend it. You know, if you're interested in something that's a toon, but it's going to take itself seriously and have human characters, but at the same time is done well, go for it. It's definitely not surreal humor. It has humor in it.
Oh, I'm sure it will.
And it has a Hawaiian guy that's pretty funny. He's kind of like he's the comic relief, but he's also at the same time kind of the wiser mentor figure.
Gotcha.
So we have, rocket power. What's next?
Before we get into kind of our final hurrah for this,
Okay.
one that I feel I need to talk a bit about,
All right.
I have 3 written here on here we kind of need to mention.
Okay.
And maybe if we remember anything about it, because
It'll come up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Hey Arnold.
Hey Arnold. Hey Arnold.
Yum? That sounds weird.
I don't know. It's just what popped in my head.
Like, hey Arnold!
That was a show that was okay.
I may have seen an episode or two, but
I remember he lived with his grandfather.
grandparents.
Oh, okay. So just the grandfather.
I know the grandfather was more stable, the grandmother was a bit more out there.
Oh, okay. But I remember he had a head shaped like a football.
Yeah, the only reason I remember that is because his rival
Yeah, the girl.
kept calling him Football Head.
Which I never understood why in a show that was dealing with human characters somebody had a misshapen head.
I don't know.
It just seemed odd to me. Like, because that was a show that to an extent took itself seriously.
But not too seriously. I think it kind of had the...
Oh no, there was definitely comedic elements there. There was definitely humor there. And when I say that a show takes itself seriously, I don't mean like it's always like a drama. I mean,
no, but it's more of the fact that what I think you mean is the fact like for Rocket Power, Thornberries, and this is the fact that even though it's cartoons, no one's being hit by an anvil,
right?
Or like being able to fall off a cliff and not be hurt,
right?
Like if in Rocket Power, I'm sure I'm guessing, but I'm sure if in one episode they're skating around and they try to do a trick and they hurt themselves,
right?
It's not going to be like, oh, I'm fine, and brush it off. It's like, oh, I've hurt myself. Take me to, like, is it broken? Am I going to be okay? Can I still skate?
Right.
So
yeah, it was definitely handled like that.
Yeah, so like, if stuff like that would happen. So in this case, it's that sense where they can't just take a fall or the violence aspect isn't there for cartoons. So it's and like they can't do like the takes outtake pop their eyeballs out at stuff. So it's it has a more pseudo-realistic tone to it, to call it.
I like that. Pseudo-realistic.
I know it takes place in New York, so decent setting for a cartoon.
Yeah.
A lot to tell for city life, and for the most part, not a whole lot of our tunes so far have been taking place in a city.
It's true.
I mean, granted, Rocko's Modern Life kind of did, but it was more of a suburban city.
Yeah. And Rocket Power did, you could call it a city. I mean, there were streets. But it was kind of off on the almost on the beach, or at least in a beach lake setting. So
well, for me, I kind of picture Rocket Power maybe taking I know it was in L.A. or California,
kind of
but
an
to me
LA like.
To me, and in that kind of town, it's kind of got more trees. It's got more space for you to have that kind of culture. So for me, it's kind of it'd kind of be like maybe oddly enough like Fort Lauderdale, where you have plenty of places where you're near the beach. You got city, you got some buildings, but there's also plenty of room to roam.
Yeah. Oh, it's definitely like that.
But other than that, I didn't really watch this show.
Yeah,
I may have seen a couple of episodes here and there, but I don't remember it well enough to really talk about it.
Just because it didn't catch my interest.
I think for me it's kind of the same way. So, how about Angry Beavers?
I saw one episode, and it was the only episode that I caught my attention, and all I wanted to do was watch that episode again. Because one of the Angry Beavers created a superhero called Muscular Beaver, and I thought it was hilarious and awesome. And I just wanted to keep watching it, but it was not long. It was not a long episode, and they didn't do it very long. Like, oh, because I was more interested in the idea of muscular beavers than I was the Angry Beavers.
I'm sure I've seen an episode or two. I honestly can't remember a thing. This was not one of the shows I watched. I don't know why. Because like it's one of those things where I know it was on at a time when I was still watching a lot of cartoons.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, I just didn't watch it.
Well,
so maybe it was just whatever it was up against. Like maybe that was when Power Rangers was on. I was like, forget Angry Beavers, Power Rangers is on. That's my interest. I honestly don't remember. I
doubt that because I do remember, and I'm spitballing here, but if my memory serves me correct, angular beavers. Now we're moving into trig.
That's why I didn't like the show.
Angry Beavers, I believe, came out in the late 90s.
If they'd only made it as a game, but you shot it at Angry Pigs. Got Angry Birds, Angry Beavers.
No, Angry Beavers would not get shot at pigs, they'd get shot at the dam. So you actually have to bust the dam with the Angry Beaver.
Gotcha.
That would actually be pretty awesome.
No, that beaver has a circular saw for a mouth.
Well, they wouldn't need that. Just that shot. They just.
I know, but that's like his effect.
Yeah. That'd be pretty awesome.
I'm surprised no one's done that something like that yet.
Now I'm kind of thinking about the angular beaver thing. I think that'd be a funny thing to see. Just like Picasso drawing of a beaver.
I bet you someone's done that somewhere.
Probably.
People are weird.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I know this is just because it's funny and kind of going along with that theme. A couple years ago when I was teaching high school, one of my students decided to draw a picture of Tangent, the awkwardly angled dog. To which I was like, okay, that's pretty awesome. Just because of the creativity needed for that concept.
I can do you one, maybe not better, but on the same level.
Okay.
Our friend Steven once created a character called Super Chicken Lumphead Man.
I very vaguely remember this. The name sounds oddly familiar. Now there's a premise for a show.
That's a weird show. But then again, if they can get away with a show like The Oblongs, they can get away with Super Chicken Lumphead Man.
Yeah.
It could be an Adult Swim. You're right next to Aqua Teen Hunger Force, 12-Ounce Mouse, the Squidbillies.
Yeah.
You know, Robot Chicken. Hey, what were you about to say?
I don't know.
It was about the fact, like the timeline you think it was, because you were saying you didn't know, because I was saying maybe Power Rangers.
Because if my memory serves me correct, Angry Beavers was on in the late 90s. Because I remember
sure it was, but I mean, Power Rangers was on in the 90s too.
Yeah, but that was more early to mid 90s.
I'm not sure.
Well, the only reason I know this is because I do distinctly remember late 90s was when I was in high school, and I was not watching Power Rangers in high school. But I do remember it might have been the transition. Like I said, I'm not. Don't quote me on this, but
I'm relatively sure Power Rangers was out while we were still in middle school.
Oh, definitely. I mean, it came out, 94, I think?
Something like that.
It was during my full run, the entire time I was in middle school. I definitely remember that.
Yeah.
But as far as, like, Angry Beavers, I think that came out later.
Probably.
I don't, this isn't, quote me on this sort of thing, but I think it came out later. But it could have just kind of been a thing where maybe you caught a couple minutes and were like, oh, I'm not really interested or something, you just don't remember it. Or maybe like it was on a time slot where you were not necessarily Power Rangers, but interested in watching something else.
Or, I was at school, or I was doing something after school.
Like your wrestling thing.
Yeah.
You never know. So, either way, you didn't see it. What's next?
Cat Dog.
Can we not talk about that?
I'm interested to hear why you don't want to talk about Cat Dog.
Because the concept of you literally taking a cat, cutting it in half, fusing it to a dog cutting out is stupid. How does it poop? I mean, literally, just like the cat poop into the dog and the dog. I don't understand.
That's oddly enough, even though I've seen, I'll say at least 3 episodes, and obviously it's never been touched on in the show. But what's kind of funny is I remember reading an interview from the creator, and he says that's the number one question I get, is like, are they going to be okay? Because how does going to the bathroom work? And he was like, that came from all ages, and I honestly had no answer, so I just never answered.
I mean, it was just one of those things where not only that, but I remember seeing a preview and go, wow, this looks like a pile of garbage.
It wasn't bad.
It just looked like too ridiculous. I mean, not even so much ridiculous. It just looked stupid. It looked like there was no thought put into it whatsoever. Like I said, I'm going based upon the preview, on like the commercials for it. I just never watched it. I was like, I'm not watching this crap.
I mean, the premise was basically, in the title song, it was like, mother and father, one was a cat, one was a dog, and here's their offspring.
Yeah.
So it wasn't the fact that someone fused them together. It was like through mechanics.
That's even more retarded.
I'm just going by what the show was based on.
I would have been okay if it was like, he had the dog snout and then like do it somehow. That could have done better.
And it was, of course, it was a weird show. And it kind of went back to the sense that it was not obviously taken seriously, so it was very cartoony.
Yeah.
And it was just basically the misadventures of, like, how do we cope? Because, like, we're so different because we're a cat and a dog. And the cat's more, intelligent than the dog. And they have to go, like, they have to try to be accepted in life because they're obviously very unconventional. Because, like, people are like, you're weird. And, like, no, we're not. We're just different.
Now I know why I didn't watch this show. I was right. It is a pile of garbage.
I mean, I didn't care for it myself, but
and
I was
especially
at
the time,
it wasn't bad.
when you're getting accustomed to, we'll say, pseudo-realistic shows, and you present them, it's like, I don't want to watch that crap. It's like, I'm done with that. At least, and I say that, but at the same time, DuckTales and Tailspin and those were not, not pseudo-realistic, but I think that there was to an extent where even though they had animal characters, they were still approaching things somewhat seriously.
Somewhat. I mean, they still had things like, obviously, when people got blown up, and which they had plenty of.
Yeah, then no one got hurt. But at the same time,
falls.
It just, I don't know. Cat Dog was one I refused to watch.
Like I said, I mean, wasn't my thing either, but it wasn't bad. It was not a horrible show. Was it one of their best? Probably not. I wouldn't lump it in with some of these others, but it was still okay.
If you say so.
But I'm not going to go beyond that.
Yeah. That's just, oddly enough, that was one of those shows that, and it's weird, because I'm the person who can tolerate crappier things than you, and for some reason I could not handle that. So who knows?
Who knows? And this brings us to probably the final one. I think we're maybe missing a couple tunes here and there, but the thing is, as we've kind of been hinting at, by this point in our lives, we kind of stopped watching Nick Toons.
Yeah. Mostly because we felt that the quality of the cartoons that were being put out, not just by Nickelodeon, but in things in general, just were not as what we were come to expect as quality.
But also it was just the fact that our interests kind of changed. I mean,
yeah.
We were getting older. For certain things, like, yeah, Batman was your thing, but, like, that show by this point has long done.
Right.
DVDs haven't really been out yet at that point.
Yeah.
At least not to a large extent, so they were readily available, and Batman was certainly not out at that point.
Right.
So you can catch reruns, yeah, but for the most part, it was no longer on TV.
Right.
So for the most part, we were either on to different shows altogether or just not really watching as much. Like, for me, I know at that point, I wasn't watching as much TV as I used to, plus I was just more active in other things.
Right. Well, I was going to say, too, like, I remember, with high school, I had orchestra, I had wrestling, this sort of thing, so...
And plus, during the day at that point, like, rather than just watch TV, I would either go with my friends somewhere or I had video games. So, yeah, I was in front of a TV, but I wasn't watching it.
Yeah.
So, for that point, I kind of missed out. But late high school...
My TV didn't get cable, so...
Late high school... And pretty much the rest of college, I discovered this show.
Okay.
Invader Zim. 2000 to 2002. So I graduated in 2002 from high school. So this is about that time.
About the time where, I could see that kind of hitting you with the right interest.
And this was created, and this was also I was starting to kind of get back into, I won't say comic books exactly, but I started getting kind of back into graphic novels.
Okay.
And I was already somewhat familiar with the artist who did the show.
Okay.
And forgive me if I pronounce your name wrong, sir, because you're quite funny. I want to say his name is Yonen, because it's Jonen.
If his last name is Vasquez. Most like it's Honan.
Maybe. I'm not sure.
Because the J is pronounced like an H in Spanish. So.
Perhaps. But he is the creator of many very... I'll just go on the limb and say very dark humor, science fiction-ish, out there style of humor.
Is that the guy who does Squee?
He's the guy who did Squee,
okay.
Which I gave you to read and I never got back.
Okay, I owe you a graphic novel.
He also he also made Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, which was a kind of a underground hit.
Okay.
He's also done a lot of other various artworks. There's a company called Slave Labor Graphics.
Okay.
They do a lot of the kind of underground, more out there stuff.
Oh, okay.
And I mean, they've done a lot of cool things too with their stuff. So they kind of have the more offbeat stuff.
Yeah.
More, let's say, an indie
Okay.
stuff. Where if you have Marvel and DC as, let's compare them to Paramount and Universal, let's say.
Okay.
So like big name, and then you have
Yeah.
independent, like let's say Miramax.
Yeah. Because
To put it in perspective.
Miramax. It's always good for independent films. Kevin Smith.
Right. So it's kind of on that same level. So he kind of already had this reputation of putting out quirky, interesting things.
Right.
And he really brought that to Invader Zim. And
Yes,
basically,
'cause I have seen at least one episode.
the basic premise is it's an alien who has invaded Earth, and he's trying to infiltrate it the best way he knows how. And he has to obtain knowledge, and the best way he knows how to do that is to go to school.
Makes sense to me.
And of course, this being Vasquez, he has a very spin on how things are run. Like school is spelled Skool.
Okay.
And the only reason Zim is sent to Earth is because the rulers of the planet, and the only reason they're rulers is because they're the tallest. They're referred to as the almighty tallest. And that's the only reason why they're the leaders.
Makes sense to me.
So,
the biggest people get to rule the planet.
even if they aren't the smartest, which is his commentary on things.
Yeah.
So they're like, Zim is kind of overzealous, let's say,
Yeah.
overeager, and he himself not the brightest tool in the tool shed.
Right.
Because he's like, I will do it with a flare, and I will do it to the extreme. And they're like, oh, no. We don't want you blowing things up just for the heck of blowing it up because you want to do the job. So let's take you to, and they go to a big chart, go all the way to the end and see a Post-it note on their map and say, Earth, go there. And I'm like, okay, sir, I need my sir, which stands for Standard Information Retrieval, which is their Android.
Nice.
And they're like, okay, we'll give you a sir. And they go to a garbage bin, pick one up, put trash in its head, close the lid, then give it a tap, and it boots up. And it goes, Grr, reporting for duty. And Zim's like, Grr, what's the G stand for? And then it goes, I have no idea. And we are introduced to probably what is the best-known character of the series, Grr.
Yeah.
Which is the android Sir unit,
Right.
which disguises itself as a dog, which is basically a green dog with a zipper up front that no one seems to question. And he is just so zany and fun.
The thing is, this actually, while I know I have at least seen it in an episode or two that I've watched with you.
I own the box set.
Yeah. Yes, you do. Proudly.
Indeed.
I've had students who proudly display their Grr swag.
I still have students.
So,
in fact, our friend Steven has a Grr hoodie, has a Grr hat.
he does.
Yes, he does.
Interesting, because he doesn't strike me as a Grr person. But then again...
The thing is, he kind of caught at the tail end, too. He's certainly not as big a fan as I am, but it's the fact that he's seen enough episodes to be like, I like this character.
Yeah.
He's funny. And I can appreciate it.
Yeah.
And it kind of, even though I said it's dark humor and science fiction humor, because that character alone, he adds such a big slapstick element to it and such a...
Yeah.
He really helps it keep it very lighthearted, even at its most dramatic and craziness. Because he is very off-the-wall nuts. He is very hard to keep control. He is basically the ADD, hyperactive little brother you never had. Or you want him to do stuff, you're like, come on, Gerd, do this. Please do this. Nope, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this now. In the debut, in the pilot episode, where he's going to Earth. On their way to Earth, he's like, I'm going to sing the Doom song now. And he keeps going, Doom, Doom, the Doom, Doom, Doom. And then you get to part 2. And it's they mention how long it's been a trip. It was so many weeks later, he's still singing. And it's Doom, Doom, Doom. And Zim's like, Grr, please stop singing. So you can imagine imagine a little brother who is hyped up on sugar on a road trip, constantly singing, like, "Are we there yet?" And just the most annoying song possible. And you're like, "Stop singing!" And they won't.
See, there's a reason that I don't have a brother like that. Because if I did...
He'd be dead?
Well, he wouldn't be dead, but I'd be dead because my mother would kill me for getting crap on my little brother for just being annoying.
But, you know, for Gert's case, for us, it's an amusing annoying.
Yeah.
And I've mentioned this before in one of our earliest episodes, actually, our first one, in fact.
Oh, okay.
But I'll get, like, the reason why it ended up being canceled early, which was a very big shame because it had a big following at the time, and it still has a following today.
Well, yeah, I mean, we both have students who, and these students were born at the time the show came out. You know, they're proud, displaying the swag. So, if they know about it, there's something going on here.
Was the fact that I would say the reason why it was canceled was just due to bad management.
Yeah, that's what a lot of it is.
Was for one thing, like I'll get to it, like, but the Vasquez wasn't used to working with so many people. So it wasn't. I wouldn't say it's so much on him because he was putting up really good stuff, like the episodes he was writing and directing.
Right.
He didn't direct a lot, but he was writing all of them. Like, and his sense of humor is really shining through, and he was basically saying, like, other than having to tone down the language, his sense of humor didn't have to change one bit.
Right.
So a lot of it was really, really great stuff.
Yeah.
His only problem was the fact that, like, some of the management portion of it was the fact that they couldn't figure out a time slot. They're like, oh, it should be here. No, wait, it should be here. No, wait, it should go be here. Which, again, was basically the death nail to it.
Yeah.
It killed it because people were like, what time's it on? We don't know. Keeps me moving around.
Yeah. That's one thing hopefully networks have learned from I mean, as much as great a show as this is, like I said, with the episode I've seen, it's a good show. But it was a failure because if you don't put it on at the same time, on the same day of the week, so people know when it's on, they can't watch it.
And also I think it was because I think some of the bigger Nick execs weren't as sure about it.
Yeah.
So they didn't promote it nearly as much as they could have.
Yeah.
So there was that, and they even, like, when they canceled it early, so there were still a lot of episodes that were unfinished, that were still being made, and they didn't just finish it. So
wow.
I don't even know if there's any available on the DVD like that. They just have all the complete episodes. So there's some unfinished Zim stuff that will probably never see the light of day because Nick doesn't release things, because that's also the unfortunate thing where, because it was canceled early and not finished, someone like Vasquez, who has all these talented ideas,
right,
can't take this show to another network who will gladly take it.
Right.
Because by the time it got canceled, they kind of realized, oh, it was popular, but we're done. We've already kind of said no to him, and I don't think he's going to return.
Yeah.
Because he kind of felt kind of brushed off. He's like, nah, I'm not going to go back, even if they offered. So it was kind of a dumb move, where it's like, because obviously, like, the DVD sales did well to the point where that's the only reason why all these kids nowadays know what Invader Zim is.
Right.
Because all of us who grew up with liking it, or not so much grew up, but like kind of caught the tail end, or the ones who did grow up and now have kids of their own,
right,
have the DVDs and show their kids.
Pass good shows on to your kids.
Yeah.
It's the only way it's going to stay around, because apparently, I mean, that's two bad moves on Nickelodeon.
I mean, no one's perfect.
No, I know, but I'm just saying that's two bad moves from one network. I don't think it'd be one thing if they made a bad move the first time and learned from that, but two bad moves of a similar case.
I mean, the thing is, it happens.
It happens.
Because the thing is, a lot of times they don't look at the big picture; they look at the ratings, and that's a very hard thing to ignore.
Right.
But for me, I would say that shouldn't be the only thing you base it on.
Yeah.
Like, if you have a positive fan response, I would say wait it out. The ratings will pick up eventually. And the thing is, it doesn't have to be... The thing is, a lot of times they want just strong ratings. That's all they focus on.
Yeah.
You shouldn't all the time.
No,
yes, I mean, if it's doing dismal and, like, falling all the time, yeah, you should probably can it, even if the fan response is good. But if it's mostly good response, and you have to be like, oh, its ratings are bad, but, like, it's because you keep moving it around.
Yeah.
And you're not promoting it as heavily, that's your own fault.
Yeah. Bad management does not, what's the word I'm looking for? Does not contribute, or does not mean that a show is bad. Yeah, it makes it difficult for us to watch and to keep the show going, but it doesn't mean that the show is bad.
I mean, and it still happens all the time. Like, I mean, I think you mentioned it in the last episode where Firefly was a great series that people loved, and it just got canceled. And people were like, why? We love this show.
Well, the thing is, it was stupid of Fox because they showed the show out of order. If you're going to tell the story out of order, it makes no sense.
You know, and then Fox canceled Family Guy, even though people loved it. And then they're like, oh.
Well, Fox cancels a lot of shows that people like.
Yeah, because they're Fox.
That was awesome.
So, I mean, I have a lot of cool memories from Invader Zim. I mean, thing is, it's so quirky and weird and fun. I really can't do it justice by doing episode synopsis, because you kind of have to see them to really get it.
Yeah, you do. But,
do you have anything really to add to Zim?
I think I need to wash my hands. Andrew! Why is there bacon in the soap?
I made it myself! Freaks out. Yo.
Freaks in! Freaks out!
The content of the Freakacast is copyright to Andrew Felson and Matthew Puetz. All characters belong to their respective owners. A full list of music used will be provided on the website. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Copyright 2012.
I gotta sing the Doom song now. Doom, 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 doom,
Would you please stop singing? Proximity warning. Planet ahead.
We're here! We're finally here!